Hi everyone, it's Hayley here from the Gale Library in Newton, here today with Fablehaven. Yay! We are now on chapter 14 of 19, so we are almost done with the book, just a few weeks left. If you remember, we left off chapter 13, which was an unexpected message, where Kendra and Seth had discovered that the chicken that they were looking after in their bedroom was actually their grandma Sorensen. She left a message in the birdseed, which is actually quite funny to think that she was a chicken, and that Seth had saved her during the night of when he opened the window, and he managed to rescue the chicken, which was good because it was grandma. So the next chapter, chapter 14, is called Trolling for Grandpa. And we will, I know we're a little bit late posting this week, but we'll be back on Monday with the next chapter 15. So here we go, Trolling for Grandpa. I will just read the last paragraph of chapter 13 so you can remember where we left off. Grandma sighed. Our nearest option would be Nero. Who? Kendra said. A cliff troll. He has a seeing stone. If we can successfully bargain with him, he should be able to reveal Stan's location. Do you know him well? Seth asked. Never met him. Your grandfather had dealings with him once. It will be dangerous, but at present he is probably our best alternative. We should hurry. I'll tell you more on the way. So now chapter 14, Fablehaven, Brandon Mull, Trolling for Grandpa. Have you ever heard people conversing while you're falling asleep? Grandma said. The words reach you from a distance. You can barely glimpse the meaning. That happened to me in a motel once when we were on a trip, Kendra said. Mum and Dad were talking, I fell asleep, and their conversation turned into a dream. Then to some degree you can grasp my state of mind as a chicken. You say it is June. My last clear memories are from February, when the spell was enacted. For the first couple of days I remained fairly alert. Over time I lapsed into a twilight consciousness, incapable of rational thought, unable to interpret my surroundings as a human would. Weird, Seth said. I recognized you kids when you arrived, but it was through a clouded lens. My mind did not reawaken until you let those creatures in through the window. The shock jolted me out of my stupor. It was a struggle to cling to my elevated consciousness. I cannot describe the concentration it required to write that message to you. My mind wanted to slip away, to relax. I wanted to eat the delicious kernels, not arrange them into bizarre patterns. They traveled along a wide dirt road. Rather than head back towards a house, they continued on the trail beyond the ivy shack, ventured deeper into the forest. The trail had eventually forked and then intersected the road that they were currently following. The sun blazed overhead, the air was heavy and humid, and the forest remained unnaturally silent all around them. Kendra and Seth had bought a pair of jeans, but they turned out to be from Grandma's skinnier days and were not even close to fitting. The tennis shoes belonged to Grandpa and were several sizes too big, so Grandma now wore a bathing suit under her robe, and her feet remained in slippers. Grandma raised her hands, staring as she opened and closed them. Strange to have proper fingers again, she murmured. How did you become a chicken in the first place? Seth asked. Pride made me careless, Grandma said, a sobering reminder that none of us are immune to the dangers here, even when we imagine we have the upper hand. Let's save the details for another time. Why didn't Grandpa change you back? Kendra asked. Grandma's eyebrows shot up. Probably because I kept laying eggs for his breakfast. I'd like to think that if he had taken me to Muriel in the first place, I could have prevented all this nonsense from happening. But I suppose he was searching for an alternate cure to my condition. Besides asking Muriel, Seth said. Exactly. Then why did he have Muriel cure me? I'm sure he knew your parents would return soon, leaving insufficient time to discover another remedy. You had no idea that Seth had become a mutant walrus and been restored by Muriel, Kendra said. I missed all that, Grandma said. As a hen, most details escaped me. When I urged you to take me to Muriel, I assumed she still had 2 knots remaining. Only when I looked up and observed the single knot did I begin to fathom the actual predicament. By then it was too late. Incidentally, how did you end up as a walrus? Seth and Kendra related the particulars about turning the Farian into an imp and the subsequent retribution. Grandma listened, asking a few clarifying questions. As the path curved around a tall thicket, a covered bridge came into view ahead, spanning a ravine. The bridge was composed of dark wood. Although aged and weathered, it appears to be in reasonably good repair. Our destination draws near, Grandma said. Beyond the bridge? Kendra asked. Down in the ravine. Grandma stopped, studying the foliage off to either side of the road. I am suspicious of the stillness in the woods. A great tension rests upon Fablehaven today. She resumed walking. Because of Grandpa? Seth asked. Yes, and your newfound enmity towards with the fairies. But I worry there may be something more. I am anxious to speak with Nero. Will he help us? Kendra asked. He would rather harm us. Trolls can be violent and unpredictable. I would not solicit information from him if our situation were less dire. What's the plan? Seth asked. Our only chance is clever bargaining. Cliff trolls are cunning and ruthless, but their avarice can be weakness. Avarice? Seth asked. Greed. Cliff trolls are can't get my words out today. Miserly creatures. Treasure hoarders. Cunning negotiators. They relish the thrill of besting an opponent. Whatever agreement we reach, Nero will have to feel like the undisputed victor. I only hope we can determine something he values that we are willing to part with. What if we can't? Kendra said. We must. If we fail to reach an arrangement, Nero will not let us leave unscathed. They arrived at the brink of the ravine. Kendra placed a hand down against the bridge and leaned forward to look down. It was surprisingly deep. Tenacious vegetation clung to the steep walls. A narrow stream trickled along the bottom. How do we get down there? Carefully, Grandma said, taking a seat at the edge of the precipice. Rolling over onto her stomach, she started backing down the slope feet first, looking ridiculous in her robe and slippers. The incline was not completely vertical, but most of the descent was quite steep. If we fall, we'll tumble all the way to the bottom, Kendra observed. A sensible reason not to fall, Grandma agreed, moving carefully downwards. Come along, it looks worse than it is. Just find solid handholds and take one step at a time. Seth followed Grandma, and then Kendra started down, desperately hugging the side of the ravine, taking tentative steps, hunting blindly for the next place to rest her foot. But Grandma was right. Once she got going, the climb was less difficult than it appeared. There were many handholds, including scrawny bushes with well-anchored stems. After proceeding gingerly at first, she grew in confidence and increased the speed of her descent. When Kendra reached the bottom, Seth was squatting near a cluster of blossoms at the edge of the stream. Grandma Sorensen stood nearby. You took long enough, Seth said. I was being careful. I've never seen somebody move an inch an hour before. No time for bickering, Grandma said. Kendra did just fine, Seth. We need to hurry along. I like the smell of these flowers, Seth said. Come away from those, Grandma insisted. Why? They smell great. Take a whiff. Those flowers are perilous, and we're in a hurry. Grandma waved for him to follow and started walking, picking her way carefully along the rocky floor of the ravine. Why are they dangerous? Seth asked, catching up with her. Those are a peculiar class of lotus blossoms. The smell is intoxicating, the taste divine. A tiny nibble of a single petal carries you away into lethargic trance populated by vivid hallucinations. Like drugs? More addictive than most drugs. Sampling a lotus blossom awakens a craving that will never be silenced. Many have wasted their lives pursuing and consuming the petals of those bewitched flowers. I wasn't going to eat one. No? Sit and smell them for a few minutes, and you'll end up with a petal in your mouth before you know what you're doing. They proceeded in silence for a few hundred yards. The walls of the ravine grew more sheer and rocky as they progressed. They noticed a few other clusters of lotus blossoms. Where is Nero? Kendra asked. Grandma scanned the wall of the ravine. Not much further. He lives upon the ledge. We have to climb up to him? Stan said Nero lowered a rope ladder. What's that? Seth asked, pointing up ahead. I'm not sure, Grandma said. A good distance down the ravine, about 20 upright logs of increasing height led from the edge of the stream to the wall of the ravine. The longest log granted access to a rocky ledge. Might be our destination. That is not what Stan described. They arrived at the logs. The lowest was 3 feet tall. The next was 6 feet, and each subsequent log stood roughly 3 feet taller than the previous one, until the tallest, rose about 60 feet high. The logs were arranged about 3 feet apart in a staggered row. None of the logs had any limbs. Short or tall, they were all of a similar circumference, about 18 inches, and they were all cut flat across the top. Placing a hand beside her mouth, Grandpa called up the ledge. "Nero, we would like to meet with you." "Not a good day," answered a voice, deep and silky. "Try me next week." They could not see the speaker. "We must meet today or never," Grandma insisted. "Who has such an urgent need?" the resonant voice required. "Ruth Sorensen and her grandchildren." "Ruth Sorensen, what is your request?" "We need to find Stan." "The caretaker?" "Yes, I could discern his location. Ascend the stairs and we'll discuss terms." Grandma looked around. "You don't mean these logs?" she called. "I most assuredly do. Stan said you had a ladder." "That was before I set up these logs. No small undertaking. Climbing them looks precarious." "Call it a filter," Nero said, "a means to ensure that those who seek my services are in earnest." "So we must climb the logs for the privilege of speaking with you. How about we talk from down here?" "Unacceptable." "Your stairs are equally unacceptable," Grandma said firmly. "If your need is dire, you will scale them," observed the troll. "What have you done with the ladder?" "I still have it." "May we please climb it instead? I'm not dressed for an obstacle course. We'll make it worth your while." "How about a compromise? One of you climb the logs, then I will lower the ladder for the other two. Final offer. Concede or go acquire your information elsewhere." "I'll do it," Seth said. Grandma looked at him. "If anyone is climbing those logs, it will be me. I'm taller and better able to reach from log to log. I have smaller feet, so the logs will feel bigger. I'll keep my balance easier." "Sorry, Seth. This is something I must do." Seth dashed over to the first log, scrambled onto it without much trouble, and, taking a jump as if we were playing leapfrog, ended up seated on top of the second log. Grandma hurried over to the second log. "You get down from there!" Seth shakily got to his feet. Leaning forward, he placed his hand on the third log. From his position on the second log, the top of the third log came almost to the middle of his chest. Another leapfrog jump, and he sat atop the 9-foot log. "I can do this," he said. "It won't be so easy as you get higher," Grandma warned. "Come down. Let me do it." "No way. I already have one dead, Grandma." Kendra watched silently. From his seated position, Seth shifted to his knees and rose unsteadily to his feet. He leapt to the next log, now well out of Grandma's reach. Kendra was quietly glad Seth was climbing the logs. She could not picture Grandma doing it successfully, especially dressed in a bathrobe and slippers. At the very least, think of the terrible places she could get splinters. And Kendra could clearly envision Grandma Sorensen crumpled in a lifeless heap at the base of a log. "Seth Andrew Sorensen, you mind your grandmother. I want you to come down from there." "Stop distracting me," he said. "It may seem like fun on these lower logs, but when you get higher—" "I climb high stuff all the time," Seth insisted. "My friends and I climb up in the bars under the bleachers at the high school. If we fell there, we could die too." He rose to his feet. He seemed to be getting better at it. Seth landed on the next log, straddling it for a moment before getting to his knees. "Be careful," Grandma said. "Don't think about the height." "I know you're trying to help," Seth said, "but please stop talking." Grandma came and stood by Kendra. "Can he do this?" she whispered. "He has a good chance. He's really brave and pretty athletic. The height might not get to him. I would freak out." Kendra wanted to look away. She did not want to see him fall, but she could not take her eyes off from her brother as he leapfrogged from log to log, higher and higher. As he jumped to the 13th, almost 14 feet high now, he leaned precariously to one side. Chills raced through Kendra, as if she were the one losing her balance. Seth gripped with his legs and leaned the other way, regaining his equilibrium. Kendra could breathe again. 14, 15, 16. Kendra glanced at Grandma. He was going to make it. 17, and he got to his feet, wobbled a bit, hands out to either side. "These tall ones are shake a little," he called down. Seth leapfrogged to the next log and landed awkwardly, teetering too far on one side. For a moment he hovered on the brink of regaining his balance. Every muscle in Kendra's body clenched in horror. Arms pinwheeling, Seth fell. Kendra shrieked. She could not look away. Something flashed from the ledge, a slender black chain with a metal weight at the end. The chain coiled around one of Seth's legs. Instead of falling to the ground, he swung onto the cliff, colliding roughly with the stone wall. For the first time, Kendra had a view of Nero. Built like a man, the troll had reptilian features. A few bright yellow markings decorated his glossy black body. He held in a webbed hand the chain from which he dangled Seth, muscles bulging powerfully. Nero hurled Seth up onto the ledge. They passed out of sight, and then the rope ladder unfurled from the ledge, unwinding all the way to the base of the cliff. "Are you okay?" Kendra yelled up at Seth. "I'm fine," he answered. "Just had the wind knocked out of me." Grandma started up the ladder. Kendra followed, forcing herself to focus on grabbing the next rung, denying the impulse to look down. At length, she reached the ledge. She moved to the rear of the ledge, standing beside the low mouth of a dark cave from which wafted a cool draft. Nero looked even more intimidating up close. Tiny, sleek scales covered his sinuous body. Though he was not much taller than Grandma, the thickness of his brawny physique made him seem massive. He had a snout rather than a nose, and bulging eyes that never blinked. A row of sharp spines ran from the center of his forehead to the small of his back. "Thank you for rescuing Seth," Grandma said. "I told myself, if the boy makes it past 15 logs, I will assist him if he falls. I admit that I am curious to hear what you will exchange to learn the location of your husband." His voice was suave and rich. "Tell us what you have in mind," Grandma said. A long grey tongue popped out of his mouth and licked his right eye. "You would have me speak first? So be it. I do not ask much, an insignificant trifle for the proprietress of this illustrious preserve. 6 coffers of gold, 12 puncheons of silver, 3 casks of uncut gems, and a bucket of opals." Kendra looked at Grandma. Could she possibly own that much treasure? "A reasonable sum," Grandma said. "Unfortunately, we have brought no such riches with us. I can wait while you retrieve the payment if you leave the girl as collateral. Regrettably, we lack the time to shuttle treasure to you, unless you would reveal Stan's location before receiving compensation." Nero licked his left eye and grinned, a hideous sight that displayed double rows of needle teeth. "I must be paid in full before fulfilling your request." Grandma folded her arms. "I take it you already possess great caches of treasure. It surprises me that such a meager financial offering as I could supply could entice you to trade." "Go on," he said. "You are offering us a service. Perhaps we should repay you with a service as well." Nero nodded thoughtfully. "Possible. The boy has some spirit. Indenture him to me for 50 years. Seth looked desperately at Grandma. Grandma frowned. "I hope to leave the possibility of future business open. Therefore, I do not wish to leave you feeling slighted. The boy has spirit, but little ability. You would assume the burden of training him as a servant and find yourself yoked for his incompetence. You would add more value to his life through education than he would to yours through service." "Your candor is appreciated," Nero said, "although you have much to learn about bargaining. I begin to wonder whether you have anything of value to offer. If not, our discussion will not end well." "You speak of value," Grandma said. "I ask, what value is treasure to a wealthy troll? The more riches he possesses, the less each new acquisition improves his total worth. A bar of gold means much more to a pauper than a king. I also question what value a frail human servant would have to master infinitely more wise and capable. Consider the situation. We want you to render a service of value to us, something we cannot do for ourselves. You should expect no less." "I agree. Take care, your words are spreading a net at your feet." A lethal edge was creeping into his voice. "True, unless I am trained to deliver a service of extraordinary value. Have you ever received a massage?" "Are you serious? The idea has always struck me as ridiculous." "The idea seems absurd to the uninitiated. Beware of rash judgments. We all pursue wealth, and those who gather the most can afford certain comforts unavailable to the masses. Foremost among these luxuries is the indescribable release and relaxation of a massage at the hands of one skilled in the art." "And you claim to be skilled in this so-called art?" Trained by a true master, my ability is so great as to be nearly beyond purchase. The only person in the world who has received a full massage at my hand is the caretaker himself, and this is because I am his woman. I could give you a full massage, kneading and soothing every muscle in your body. The experience would redefine your understanding of pleasure." Nero shook his head. "It will take more than florid words and grandiose promises to persuade me." "Consider my offer in perspective," Grandma said. "People pay exuberant sums for an expert massage. You will receive yours at no cost, merely in exchange for a service. How long will it take you to ascertain Stan's location? A few moments. A massage will take me 30 grueling minutes, and you will be experiencing something new, a delight you have never encountered in all your long years. A similar opportunity may never arise again. Nero looked an eye. Granted, I have never received a massage. I could name many things I have never done, mainly because I have no interest in doing them. I have sampled human food and found it wanting. I'm not convinced I will find your massage as satisfying as you describe. Grandma studied him. 3 minutes. I will give you a sample for 3 minutes. It will afford you only a narrow glimpse of the unspeakable bliss that awaits, but should place you in a position to make a more educated decision. Very well. I see no harm in a demonstration. Then give me your hand. My hand? I will massage a single hand. You will have to use your imagination to envisage how this would feel across your entire body. He held out a hand. Grandma Sorensen took it and began working with his palm with her thumbs. At first, he tried to keep a straight face, but his mouth began to twitch and his eyes began to roll. How is that? Grandma asked. Too deep? His meager lips quivered. Just right, he purred. Grandma continued expertly rubbing his palm and the back of his hand. He started licking his eyes compulsively. She finished with his fingers. The demonstration is concluded, she announced. 30 minutes of that, you say? Across my whole body? The children will assist me, Grandma said. We will trade a service for a service. But I could exchange my service for something more enduring, for treasure. A single massage is too fleeting. The law of diminishing returns applies to massages, as it does to most things. The first is the best, and all you really need. Besides, you can always exchange your services for treasure. This may be your only chance to receive an expert massage. He held out his other hand. One more example to help me decide? No more samples. You offer just one massage. What if you stay on as my personal masseuse for 12 years? Grandma grew stern. I am not petitioning you to look in that stone of yours for multiple times for multiple purposes. I am simply requesting a single piece of information. A service for a service. That is my offer. Lopsided in your favor. The massage takes 30 minutes versus mere moments for you to peer into your stone. But you need the information, Nero reminded her. I do not need a massage. Satisfying need is the burden of the poor. The wealthy and the powerful can afford to indulge their wants and whims. If you pass on this opportunity, you will always wonder what you missed. Don't do it, Grandma, Kendra said. Just give him the treasure. Nero held up his finger. The proposition is unorthodox and against my better judgment, but the idea of a massage intrigues me, and I am rarely intrigued. However, 30 minutes is too short. Say 2 hours? 60 minutes, Grandma said flatly. 90, Nero countered. Grandma wrung her hands. She folded and unfolded her arms. She rubbed her brow. 90 minutes is too long, Kendra said. You've never given Grandpa a massage longer than an hour. Hold your tongue, child, Grandma snapped. 90 or no deal, Nero said. Grandma sighed in resignation. All right, 90 minutes. Very well, I accept. But if I do not approve of the entire massage, the deal is off. Grandma shook her head. No caveats. A single 90-minute massage in exchange for the location of Stan Sorensen. You will treasure the memory until the end of your days. Nero eyed Kendra and Seth before fixing Grandpa with a shrewd gray gaze. Agreed. How do we proceed? The best table Grandma could find was a fairly narrow stone shelf near the mouth of the cave. Nero stretched out on the shelf and Grandma showed Kendra and Seth how to massage his legs and feet. She demonstrated how and where to use their knuckles and heels of their hands. He's very strong, she said, grinding her knuckles at the bottom of his foot. Lean into it as much as you want. She set down his leg and stood beside his head. The children have their instructions, Nero. The 90 minutes starts now. Kendra hesitantly laid her hands on the troll's bulging calf. Although they were not wet, the scales felt slimy. She had held a snake before, and the texture of Nero's scaly skin was quite similar. With Nero lying prone, Grandma went to work on the back of his neck and shoulders. She employed a variety of techniques, probing with her thumbs, rubbing with her palms, pressing with her fists, and digging in with her elbows. She ended up kneeling on the small of his back, careful to avoid the spikes along his spine, squeezing and kneading and applying pressure in diverse ways. Nero was obviously in ecstasy. He purred and moaned in decadent satisfaction. A constant stream of drowsy compliments flowed from his lips. He languidly encouraged them to rub harder and deeper. Kendra grew weary, and Grandpa periodically demonstrated other techniques for her and Seth to employ. Kendra despised working on Nero's feet the most, from the roughness of his cracked heels to the smooth pads of his calluses to the lumpy bunions on his toes. But she tried her best to follow Grandma's tireless example. Besides assisting with his legs and feet, Grandma labored on his head, neck, shoulders, back, arms, hands, chest, and abdomen. When they had finally finished, Nero sat up with a euphoric smile. All the cunning had vanished from his bulbous eyes. He looked almost ready for the most satisfying nap of his whole life. "Closer to 100 minutes, Grandma said, but I wanted to do it right." "Thank you," he said giddily. "I never imagined something like that." He got to his feet, leaning against a wall of the cliff to steady himself. "You have amply earned your reward." "I've never felt anyone so full of knots and tension," Grandma said. "Well, I feel loose now," he said, swinging his arms. "I will be right back with the information you seek." Nero ducked into the cave. "I want to see his magic stone," Seth mumbled. "Wait patiently," Grandma chided, wiping perspiration from her brow. "You must be exhausted," Kendra said. "I'm not in a very good condition," Grandma admitted. "That took a lot out of me." She lowered her voice. "But it sure beats barrels of treasure we don't have." Seth wandered over to the brink of the ledge and stared down into the ravine. Grandma took a seat on the shelf where they had administered the massage, and Kendra waited beside her. Before long, Nero emerged. He still looked affable and relaxed, though quite not as loopy as before. "Stan is chained in the basement of the Forgotten Chapel." Grandma's jaws tightened. "You're sure?" "It was a little tricky finding him and sneaking a good look, considering who else is confined there. But yes, I am certain." "He's well?" "He's alive." "Lena was with him?" "The Ned?" "Sure, I saw her too." "Was Muriel in the vicinity?" "Muriel? Why would she?" "Oh, that's what it was." "Ruth, the agreement was for a single piece of information. But no, I didn't catch sight of her. I believe this concludes our arrangement." He gestured toward the ladder. "If you will excuse me, I need to lie down." That was the end of chapter 14, Trolling for Grandpa. So that's good. They found out the location. Now they just have to go find where he is. And we will be back on Monday with that information. The next chapter is called The Far Side of the Attic. And I don't know if you remember from the earlier chapters in the book that Kendra had spotted a window in the attic, but had never found out where that window went. So hopefully this will lead us to that window. Okay, you guys, it's gorgeous out. So enjoy this beautiful day and the lovely weather that we've got to come. And I will see you back on Monday with Brandon Mull's Fablehaven for chapter 15. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye.